Okay, I haven't prepared a great deal for this meeting. In fact, I've hardly prepared anything. But the first question was at the request of Emma Brown, who's not here tonight. Come in. But she will be listening. And her question was, because last time we discussed dying, and she wanted to know more about the other end of life. Do come and have a seat somewhere.
Oh, thank you.
So she wanted to know what the Mevlevi tradition and the Advaita tradition had to say about what happened at the other end of life before birth. And basically, as I understand it, it's a bit like dying in reverse. So, before birth, you're in the state of total unity, and there's no other. So when there's just total oneness, and there's nothing outside you, there's no trauma, and there's no pain, because there's nothing but you. So it's a bit like deep sleep at night, when it's such a lovely place to be in. And also it's totally timeless, because eternity doesn't mean a long time, it means no time. So it's like you're just a pure, timeless oneness. And at birth you suddenly manifest as apparent separation. And when the separation begins, that's also when the traumas begin. Because suddenly you've been in this marvellous, total oneness, without any trauma, totally timeless, and then suddenly you find yourself in this world of manifestation, and you learn separation. And with separation comes suffering. But always in the background, it's like there's this memory of the unified state. And the memory of the unified state drives your search through life. So all the time, Rumi uses the metaphor of the ney flute playing. And the ney flute is the sense, the separate self longing for its origins. So you had something to say about that, Helen.
What, tonight?
No, the other night when we were talking. You were talking about the womb state.
That was this afternoon.
This afternoon, whenever it was, timeless.
I said consciousness exists pre-birth. I actually said it exists when a sperm meets an egg, because Peter Bennett is doing research on consciousness existing outside of brain function.
The whole of the near-death experience, what it tells us is, or what it suggests, is that consciousness is universal, and the mind-body, the brain, acts more like a transmitter of consciousness. So at birth, your mind, your brain forms, and it's a vehicle for something which is already existent, which is universal. And then at death, the vehicle breaks down and dies, and then consciousness rejoins consciousness, which by all accounts is an amazing experience.
But also there's that thing of to come into the world, you go down a tunnel, don't you? We come down the birth canal. So in some traditions they say being born is dying and dying is birth. And in the dying process you also go down a tunnel into the light. So when you're born you're actually going down a dark tunnel. before, and you often come into the light because it's some hospital bright light, and you start screaming.
Yeah.
So it's that you seem to exit through enter and exit through a tunnel.
That's a great question, is which one is birth and which one is death?
Yeah.
It's probably the other way around.
Yeah.
I know there was one near-death experience where a medical student resuscitated his professor who had had a cardiac arrest, and when the professor was resuscitated, he got very angry with the medical student and said, "Never do that to me again." And then later on, when he was more conscious, he apologised and said, "The reason I said that was because you brought me back to death, not life." So it's almost like the whole thing, the whole of the way we see life and death is actually the other way around. The way Rumi puts it in the Masnavi, he says, if you knew what, when you die, you'll say, "Why didn't I die sooner? Did I stay here eating worms in the mud?"
Do you think that's why we sort of have dying processes in the Carbelones?
I think the dying process in the Macabre is all like the Sufi preparation of die before you die, so you will not taste death. It's re-acknowledging the great underlying unity. Because the amazing thing is that with the apparent birth process, and you find yourself as an apparent separate entity, underlying it, the unified state is never ever lost. So you never actually lose it. All that's happened is separation is superimposed as a veneer on top of unity, and the mind-body identifies with the vehicle of consciousness rather than with the consciousness itself. So dying in the Macabre is the re-acknowledging of the consciousness that you already are, and it's almost like you still have to be the vehicle, but it's like you're not just a vehicle. So we're going in a bit. We'll go into the whole idea of the return and the re-acknowledgement of the consciousness, because it's like within the dance of manifestation, you have this sort of. So you come out of the great oneness into being a baby. And when you're a baby, you're very helpless, and people all have to feed you and change your nappy and things. And then gradually sort of you become more independent and more separate. And then you have this whole sort of middle bit of life, which is like what I call the dance. So it's like you dance your dance, and you've got to make it a good dance. The whole art of life is having a good dance and making sure you're dancing your dance and you're not dancing someone else's dance, or someone else hasn't convinced you that you should be dancing their dance rather than dancing your own dance. And then again at the end of life you go back to sort of being like a baby again, because people have to sort of help you around, and you have Zimmer frames, and then you end up in a hospital bed, and then you're probably born back into the great oneness. So I just wanted to read one thing, which is, in a way, it's a near-death experience, but it gives the whole flavour of what it's all about, and it gives a taste of the oneness. And because my eyesight's getting bad, because I'm on the getting near the other end of the dance, I bought some Boots £12 spectacles. Okay, this is someone's... It's such a lovely description, this. You get some near-death experiences where people learn so much within the experience and they're able to put it down so brilliantly. So this happened, I think, while the lady's... I think her mother was dying. 20 years ago last April at 6:45 a.m. I suddenly awoke from a deep sleep that in itself was unusual, as I had moved 2 months before to the Welsh hills just under 1,000 feet above sea level from the seaside town of Hoylake in Merseyside. I didn't think you can actually get altitude effects from a rise of 1,000 feet, but it seems that for my fiancée and I, the move from a town by the sea to a farm in the mountains knocked us out completely. We slept each night for about 12 hours for nearly a year before we acclimatised to the mountain air and the physical work of running a small holding. We were usually in bed by 8 or 9 at night and rarely awoke before 8:30 a.m. That morning, it was the 27th of April 1991, I just found myself awake much earlier than usual. I sat up and looked at the clock and then at my sleeping fiancé and the sun streaming across the leaves of the beech trees outside the window, and I felt so good. Then the feeling of well-being just deepened into an unimaginable sense of peace and love and rightness. I remember being swept up in the feeling of not being present in the room anymore, simply lost in the experience. I suddenly just knew that there was not ever anything to worry about. I was surrounded by and filled with the most profound, pure, ecstatic, unconditional love. Love like I have never felt before. It was total. It infused every bit of me, filled me with joy. I knew that I was, always had been, and always would be totally safe. That everything was just as it should be. There was never any reason to feel fear, for everything was perfect and could never be anything but perfect, that the universe was unfolding exactly as it should. It felt as if I was seeing life, the universe and everything, from a distant, clear perspective, from outside myself, and that this perspective was the truth, and it was familiar to me. Although I never recall feeling anything like this before, I have, however, since then, a very few precious times during deep, deep meditation, reached that place again. The feeling gradually faded back to a normal feeling of well-being, and the room coalesced around me, and smiling, I lay down and went back to sleep, cuddled up to my soon-to-be husband. At 8 o'clock that morning, the phone rang. It was my sister calling to tell me that at 6:45 a.m. our mother had suddenly and unexpectedly died. It was a few months later, when I was still stuck in the middle of grieving for my mother, that I finally connected her death with the wonderful experience I'd had. I was sitting in the garden listening to a lecture by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, at that time the world's expert on death, dying and transition. During the lecture she shared the stories of various people who had had similar experiences. They were just a small example of the many people whose experiences had been recorded. Each of them had felt a variation of that pure love, peace, joy and perfection at the moment of death of a very close loved one. Usually they were very close, such as parent-child or husband-wife relationships, but had come to a sudden end with the loved one dying elsewhere. While I listened, I cried my heart out and felt some stirrings within me of the possibility of moving through my grief. I remembered the knowing that I had felt that there was nothing to fear or worry about, and that all was well. I knew that she was in that place herself, and that she had shared it with me. I was so moved and grateful that my mother had shared that with me, and the healing of my grief really began there. I think that's a fantastic description of the great unity that lies behind all manifestation. And it's both like a description of what lies before the beginning of life, and what lies at the end of life, and what lies behind it all in the middle. And when people die, I think we probably discussed this last time, particularly when turners die, if you can have their memorial macabre as the first one after they've died, it's like something fills the whole room. And I felt that in Friday's macabre, because one of our turners, Gerald Goldman, had just died the week before. And when Dr. Rolls died, it was, for me, the most profound macabre ever, because he actually died on the night of the macabre. And it was just like the room became solid love. I can't quite describe it. It was almost like you're sort of turning in ice cream somehow, and it's solid and it holds your arms up in a way that they don't normally get held up. And then again, when one of our turners, Pam Varley, died, again we had her special macabre on the actual day she died. And you'll vouch for this, Helen. It was something came in the room which is pretty awesome. When you have a later memorial macabre, as I'm sometimes asked to do, it doesn't happen. It has to be, it's like they're still around at that.
She hadn't left.
Yeah, it's like...
It's almost like she was filling the room. You were there, Hakim. No, calm down.
Oh. She was. I was reading my room, and then it brought up something when I was there when my grandfather was dying. So I was in hospital for 2 or 3 days, just sort of watching and all the stuff to do with the arm, and sort of very aware that things were in the room, etc. But what the book reminded me is that when I was left, I sort of he died and everyone went home, and I stayed that night to stay with the body. It seemed strange to sort of leave. And the next morning I was walking back, and it's from the hospital to their house, which is through the countryside. And I remember this absolute feeling that sort of this, it's like almost sort of white energy or something just went racing past me. And which was sort of, I'd already had many experiences watching him die anyway. But then reading Felix's book, I suddenly remembered that when Noah was conceived, I felt exactly the same thing go through me. And so I sort of now fully tie it's like the same sensation of the soul entering sort of life. It's the same as leaving life. I've experienced that it's the same sort of thing passing.
It's great having that example of it at both ends of life. It's really nice. Lots of people, me included, have the end of life experience.
I didn't notice it with my son, but I fully felt Nola appearing in conception.
I've got a memory, very distant memory, of being a baby and lying in the garden in Molesey by the river, and being in a total grief state because I was missing where I'd come from. So I think that must be why babies cry, I would think.
Yes, because what we were discussing this morning was because I've done a lot of craniosacral therapy, and I had an experience in craniosacral therapy treatment of being a fertilised egg and whacking myself into the wall of my mother's womb. And I thought my craniosacral therapist was asleep, and he almost used to chant when he was doing cranial treatments on me, because he was a practicing Buddhist. And I thought, he's gone to sleep, and I thought, I'll make him wake up. And in this process, I was whacking myself into the wall of my mother's womb, and at the moment in time when I did that, it was like, oh my God, I've made it. I want to be here, and I was like really happy about it. So it was the feeling of I really wanted to incarnate into the world, but at the point of birth, I didn't want to come out. And my mother had the labour from hell because I didn't want to be born. And that's something I processed in cranial treatment. So I've worked through quite a lot of the pre-birth experience. It was something we were discussing.
What else we were discussing?
Yeah.
Then we were discussing it in the unified state, there's no tax officers. I thought I had to apologise to Martha. So it's amazing. I remember Dr. Rolls at a certain point saying we've had everything completely upside down and back to front, and he related it to sort of life and death and night and day. So it's like we're looking at the whole thing from completely the other way around to how it is in reality. So when you say to someone, expect the worst, you could possibly say expect the best, because that's like when someone's going to die, you say that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. And medical science does anything, it has to keep you alive at any cost. So the thing that's always fascinated me, and is my favourite subject ever, is in the dance of life, this great circular dance of manifestation, is what I was saying about having your dance. And it's very easy to get influenced by powerful authority figures into dancing someone else's dance to please them. And yet each person has their own particular set of skills and talents, which gradually this dance of life seems to draw out of you in one way or another. And even in this group here, in this house, in this basement, I like it to be it's almost like a sort of fertile place where talents can emerge, or where you find a talent, or you can find you're good at drumming, or good at playing the saxophone, or whatever it is. But it's like the whole of life is like this dance where you dance your dance. And it's really important you don't dance from a duty point of view. It has to be from the point of view of delight. And there's an American mythologist who's dead now, he's called Joseph Campbell, and he coined this phrase called following your bliss. And I'll read you what he said. He says, now I came to this idea of bliss because in Sanskrit, which is the great spiritual language of the world, there are three terms that represent the brink, the jumping off place to the ocean of transcendence: Sat, Chit, Ananda. The word Sat means being, Chit means consciousness, Ananda means bliss or rapture. I thought, I don't know whether my consciousness is proper consciousness or not. I don't know whether what I know of my being is my proper being or not, but I do know where my rapture is. So let me hang on to rapture, and that will bring me both my consciousness and my being. I think it worked. And then the interviewer said, do you ever have this sense when you are following your bliss, as I have at moments, of being helped by hidden hands? And Joseph Campbell answered, all the time. It is miraculous. I even have a superstition that has grown up on me as a result of invisible hands coming all the time. Namely, that if you do follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while, waiting for you, and the life that you ought to be living is the one you are living. When you can see that, you begin to meet people who are in the field of your bliss, and they open the doors to you. I say, follow your bliss, and don't be afraid, and doors will open where you didn't know they were going to be. So I particularly like what he says about the concept of Sat Chit Anand, because that's, in the Advaita philosophy, that's the hallmark by which you recognise the pure being. What are its qualities? It's being, so Sat is being, Sat is the present tense of the verb to be, so it's your basic sense of I am. Chit, which translates as consciousness, is like the awareness of I am. And because there's nothing else to be aware of it, because there's only one I am, it's just like pure self-awareness. So it's consciousness aware of itself. And when that acknowledgement takes place, then you get what's known as Ananda. And Ananda is often translated as bliss or rapture, but it's probably more like this deep, really deep, still contentment. It's like almost like a sort of fathomless stillness and rightness, rather than absolute rapture, which is very fleeting. It's like this underlying thing, which is the thing which is looking out through your eyes all the time. So it's not something far away, it's not something you have to attain, but one of, in your dance, the dance of life, this circular journey, one of the most pleasurable and direct routes for re-acknowledging that is in finding what are your talents, what are you good at, what is the thing which really makes you feel alive, and going with that. It's very easy, with sort of parents and school teachers and things, and college house people, you find yourself being sort of pushed into a channel or a path, and then you wake up a little further down it, and you think, gosh, what am I doing? I never wanted to be this. So it's so important to listen to your own inner voice of what's the right thing for you and what's the wrong thing. You might be destined for a life of making cakes. And when you do your bliss following, you have the courage, then you inspire other people around you to do it. If you follow the thing you love, then that it spreads. It doesn't mean they follow your bliss, but it encourages other people to go for the thing which they love and are good at. Is there anything more on bliss following?
It's like that really famous quote, isn't it? When you shine, it gives space for other people to shine.
That's such a lovely quote, that. It's in here somewhere, I'm not sure what page it's on.
can't remember the originator, but Nelson
Nelson
Mandela
yeah.
had it in his inauguration speech.
Yeah, he quoted it from someone.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's another. Before I find that, there's another story I wanted to read if I can find it. My Zen book. Where is my Zen book?
Is here.
There it is. Thanks. I'm not sure where this fits in exactly, but it's partly for Emma Brown, because I was discussing this story with her, and it's all about when people come on the Dervish training or apply to be on the Dervish training, we have to assess whether we can actually teach them or not. Some people are so full, there's no room for any instruction, and you realise you're never going to be able to teach them. And for those people, we don't put them on the training. And this is a wonderful story that illustrates, I think what in Zen they call beginner's mind. So it's not having a mind which is so full of opinions that you're not open to new things coming in. So this is called a cup of tea. Nanin, a Japanese master during the Meiji era, received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nanin served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring. The professor watched the overflow until he no longer could restrain himself. "It is overfull, no more will go in." "Like this cup," Nanin said, "you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" I remember Dr. Oles reading us that about 40 years ago. It's such a fantastic story. So any would-be dervishes, remember to have an empty cup. Now, on the Bliss Following thing and the whole idea of dancing your dance, and the whole concept of the re-acknowledgement of the bliss, people often ask, what can I do? Is there a pathway? Or what path can I follow? And it's almost like there's no path, which is why Rumi uses the metaphor of a pathless path. He says the pathless path opens before you whenever you say there is nothing but God. And because for each person it's totally individual, it's like no one else will know what your path is other than you yourself from moment to moment. And because the universe is so arranged that way, you're always on your path. So there's never a moment when you deviate from the path. And Joseph Campbell again says, "You enter the forest at the darkest point where there is no path. Where there's a way or path, it's someone else's path. Each human being is a unique phenomenon, and the idea is to find your own pathway to bliss." So in a way that's like is, in your particular dance of life, because it's a dance of manifestation, bountiful, blissful, there's going to be lots of obstacles. Because it's time and space, there's going to be things you really dislike, and there's going to be things which you really adore. And in your particular journey, there's going to be illness, there's going to be relationship breakups, there's going to be falling in love, and you'll go through all these different cycles. And the whole point of it is it's almost like your life is a work of art, but you create around those impediments and obstacles. So you might suddenly find that you're ill for 20 years, but you work with that and you find a way of creating, following your bliss, creating your work of art within that framework. So it's almost like you work with the materials you're given in your particular dance, and with that you create, it's like you're creating this most amazing work of art. But you don't really see how amazing it is till you look at it. You get to see it from a greater vantage point, and you see it all falls together. Because often when you're working on a painting, you're just sort of doing a bit there and you do another bit down there. And if someone comes along when you're doing a painting and they sort of laugh at you and think that looks a bit of a mess, but then later on all those different bits all fall together into one, and it's seen as one coherent whole. So each of our lives is like this amazing dance where we've all got this different set of talents, and we all have, within the dance, we have particular roles that we have to play. It's not even we have to play them, we do play them, whether we like it or not. I need to read that Schopenhauer.
I was just thinking of that, it's Jason Campbell.
Yeah. Schopenhauer. Bear with me while I find Schopenhauer. Does it make sense?
What if you think you haven't found your place? Yes.
Yes.
What is it? I think was it Carl Jung? I think it was Jung who said, go back to what made you happy as a child. Because I think when he was having a midlife crisis, he started playing with rocks and stones, and it was something he did as a child, and he did. It was the same idea. I can't, because I think he realised he started. I think he built a house. It just came out spontaneously. So he said, just because you have a lot of time when you're a child, don't you? It's something that you used to play with. That's usually a starting point.
In my case, I think painting was the only thing I was any good at, so there wasn't sort of much choice in the matter. Whereas with some people who are really clever, they're sort of good at lots and lots of different things. So if anything, it must be, in a way, be a bit harder. So if you're a bit thick, it's quite a blessing. So I do pity you bright people.
But there's also finding your bliss and then learning how to make a living from that, so it's self-sustaining, which is another thing in itself.
But he's saying doors will open where you never perceive them. if you follow that.
If you're good at something, someone will pay you for it.
Yeah, it comes in mysterious form.
I think the payment often doesn't come at the beginning.
Yeah.
As Joseph Campbell explains that his passion was Red Indians and mythology, and he just went and lived in a hut in the wood and read.
Because it was the era of the Great Depression, so nobody had any money. So he just took all his books and read for years and years and years.
Was that why he said Red Indians?
Huh?
Red,
That's it, yeah, Hakim.
How did they
That's a typical Hakim joke.
Hakim Snake.
Well, I found that. Got there in the end. In my own case, with textile designing, it's just been a matter of sort of pegging away at it, whether anyone wanted the designs or not. It's got to be, your bliss has got to be so much your bliss that you're going to do it whether someone pays you or not. And then eventually someone does pay you. That's what Jude's saying. Eventually. But for me it would be so much to go in and do a job which I really hated, to sort of go into an office or whatever it was, which wouldn't be my bliss, would be so difficult. So bliss following, you're not guaranteed to get rich immediately. Or ever, but you do.
You have a happy life.
You have a happy life. It's like, who is it? Someone said something like you have to have lived to give yourself into the arms of death. You have to have lived a full life. It's almost like you have to do what you really want to do. You mustn't delay what you really want to do. I think I'll do it later, because the moment of dying comes unexpectedly. And again, I was thinking that when we were turning, about 30 years ago, I remember saying to myself, you never know when it's your last macabre. Always, when you're sort of dying at the end of the macabre, and you think, I've got to hold my arms up for another 5 minutes, and just think this may be your last 5 minutes you ever turn, and it's always maybe that. And I thought it tonight when we were turning.
I had that this evening as well.
I did.
Yeah. I thought I will have to wait till next week, or I might actually never get the chance again. So the last minute I was going really fast.
I saw you.
yeah.
And it has that neigh at the end, and you think, oh, that's it. And it goes really quiet, and you go, and it starts again. It's almost like somebody's taking their last breath, and you're singing, when's it gonna be?
And then you said afterwards about the stillness after, when the neighs ended.
Yeah.
And that's like almost like you've died.
Yeah, but it's not over till it's over. That's that last bit of the neigh. You think it's over, then it goes again.
The other thing in the movie of life, again, it's not over till it's over.
Exactly.
As a kid, my great hero was Winston Churchill. And I think the reason for that was because he didn't do his bit towards saving Western civilization till he was 65. And he was already in politics, he was already regarded as a has-been. They thought, Winston, he's washed up and no good. But his whole reason for being still lay ahead of him. And then I know other people who meet the love of their lives in their 70s. So it's not over till it's over. it's a very well composed movie. So if you're at a bit where you think, oh no, it's all over, I'll never be happy again, it's not over.
I'd got a client who she did some research about immortality, because more people are living to be over 100 years old. And so she was researching old people, and she met this one woman that did a degree aged 85 and started teaching young children who were illiterate to read and write, because her husband had died and she wanted to find a reason to keep living. So she went and did a degree. It's not
There's still hope for you, Azzy.
Yeah.
What you've gone through up till now is just a rehearsal for what's coming. So it's really important, right? Life goes, as Helen and I have observed, life goes in these sequences of little mini lifetimes. Then you go through a sort of mini lifetime, then the whole of that falls to bits. And then there's usually a little sort of interim period where you think that's it. And then this whole new lifetime suddenly emerges, and life is made up of these mini dances. And you do minuets and mazurkas and tangos with different people. Pirouettes. So it's not over till it's over, but yours is barely begun. I was going to read you the Schopenhauer bit. I read this not long ago. It's Joseph Campbell on Schopenhauer. But again, it's on the interconnectedness of the dance of the movie. And he says, Schopenhauer, in his splendid essay called On an Apparent Intention in the Fate of the Individual, points out that when you reach an advanced age and look back over your lifetime, it can seem to have had a consistent order and plan, as though composed by some novelist. Events that when they occurred had seemed accidental and of little moment, turn out to have been indispensable factors in the composition of a consistent plot. So who composed that plot? Schopenhauer suggests that just as your dreams are composed by an aspect of yourself of which your consciousness is unaware, so too your whole life is composed by the will within you. And just as people whom you will have met apparently by mere chance became leading agents in the structuring of your life, so too will you have served unknowingly as an agent giving meaning to the lives of others. The whole thing gears together like one big symphony, with everything unconsciously structuring everything else. And Schopenhauer concludes that it is as though our lives were the features of the one great dream of a single dreamer, in which all the dream characters dream too, so that everything links to everything else, moved by the one will to life, which is the universal will in nature. It's a magnificent idea, an idea that appears in India in the mythic image of the net of Indra, which is a net of gems, where at every crossing of one thread over another there is a gem reflecting all the other reflective gems. Everything arises in mutual relation to everything else, so you can't blame anybody for anything. It is even as though there were a single intention behind it all, which always makes some kind of sense, though none of us knows what that sense may be, or has lived a life that he quite intended. That could be enough for one night. It's 10:30. And you've got a long way to go to bed, George.
10 yards away.
10 yards away. I bet Wayne's bed's not much even nearer, probably. Okay, I hope that was okay for you, Swanee Brown. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll play some music.
Yeah, you can play some music. You mustn't be too loud for Georgie Bay. But you'll be in up there, won't you?
Yeah.
Maybe George wants to join us.
George gets tired.
Yes, George gets there.
Colin says hello to everybody.
Oh, does she?
Yes.
No, say hello.
Say hello to Chuckham.
So you're bountifully blissful. I was wondering
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Georgie Bay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.